Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagfeld. I am a Franciscan friar of the Sacred Heart Province, and I am the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability. The third Sunday of Lent presents us with some images with which I am certain you are familiar. The first of those images comes to us from the book of Exodus. It is the story of Moses approaching the burning bush. And in that story, God gives Moses his task, his vocation. You are to go and lead my people out of slavery and into the promised land. He also tells Moses what his name is. I am who am. This is an extremely difficult word to translate from Hebrew because it is in the future tense. However, the medieval monks who transcribed the scriptures from Hebrew into Greek had a more immediate experience of God, and so they changed it from the future tense to the present. I am rather than I will be. Their experience of God colored their interpretation of the scriptures. And the same is true of us. In the second reading, a reading that comes to us from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, Paul speaks to us of how our baptismal call, our baptismal entry into our covenant with God is not something that's magic or automatic. It calls for a response from us. Just as Moses had to respond to the burning bush, we have to respond to the invitation we receive in baptism. The gospel reading is a passage that perhaps we are not as familiar with. Some people told Jesus about the Galileans, whose blood Pilate had mingled with the blood of their sacrifices. Jesus said to them in reply, "Do you think that because these Galileans suffered in this way, they were greater sinners than all other Galileans? By no means. But I tell you, if you do not repent, you will all perish as they did. Or those 18 people who were killed when the tower at Siloam fell on them. Do you think that they were more guilty than everyone else who lived in Jerusalem? By no means. But I tell you, if you do not repent, you will all perish as they did." And he told them this parable. There once was a person who had a fig tree planted in his orchard. And when he came in search of fruit on it, but found none, he said to the gardener, "For 3 years now I have come in search of fruit on this fig tree, but have found none. So cut it down. Why should it exhaust the soil?" He said to him in reply, "Sir, leave it for this year also, and I shall cultivate the ground around it and fertilize it. It may bear fruit in the future. If not, you can cut it down." Just as God promised the Israelites that he would be with them as they made their way from Egypt to the promised land, just as God promises us when we are baptized that he will remain with us, that he will dwell within us, the gospel challenges us to look at how we respond to that notion that God is with us. Whenever a natural disaster hits, somebody will say something like this: they are being punished for their sins. A rather prominent evangelical preacher said when the earthquake hit Haiti that God was punishing them for their sins. Another prominent preacher said when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans that the hurricane came because of all the sin in New Orleans. I haven't heard anybody make such claims about the hurricane that hit the East Coast, the beaches of New Jersey. I haven't heard anybody make the same claim about the tragedy in Newtown, where 20 innocent children and 6 adults were killed. But I'm sure that lurking in the mind of some people, there is the idea that God is somehow punishing them or us for our sin by allowing these terrible things to happen. I have heard people ask, where was God when these things happened? Jesus answers the question very, very succinctly. God is not capricious. God does not punish sin by visiting natural disasters upon us. God is with us. But like the Israelites who spent 40 years in the desert, we too are in our desert time. We haven't reached the promised land yet. We live in an imperfect world. But, as St. Paul tells the people of Corinth, we need to respond to our covenant relationship by working for others, by being for others, by not looking for ways to get ahead for ourselves, but rather to be there in times of need. Indeed, natural disasters, rather than being a time when God punishes people, become a time that challenges us to respond as God would have us respond. As we celebrate this Sunday, we do so mindful of the fact that God has promised us that God will remain with us. God never promised that we wouldn't suffer. God never promised that we wouldn't experience difficulties. God never promised that we would not have to struggle. All God promises is that God will be with us in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of struggle. For more information about CUSA, please visit our website at www.cuson.org.